I put a quote at the front of your worship flyer on your notes section this morning. I found it from an actress talking about parenting, and I love this actress. She's on this show, Big Bang Theory. You may not watch it. I know some of you are really spiritual. You don't watch shows like that. Um, I think that show's hilarious, probably because I relate a little bit too much to it sometimes. But Mayim Bialik, I think that's how you say her name, she made this statement. She said, I came to parenting the way most of us do, knowing nothing and trying to learn everything. We're in this Is Us series, and This Is Us is really talking about all these vital relationships that we have in our lives. And one of the vital relationships that's really messy, really hard, really strange at times, it's just messy all the way around, is our parenting, right? And this morning, I understand you don't have to be a parent in the room to relate to this topic, right? If you have somebody in your world, somebody in your life, let's just say somebody who's 20 years old or younger, right? That you intersect them, even if it's in the job force, then you have and play have a role of responsibility in other people's lives around you, right? It's just what it is. And even if you never plan on being a parent, here's the really cool thing. You understand the role of parenting. If you go to the grocery store, if you go out to eat at a restaurant, or you go to a movie theater where little Johnny has just had a little too much movie that day, you know that the role of parenting is a hard role, right? It's full of struggles. It's full of ups and downs. And maybe if you're a parent this morning, hopefully you're here and things are really up right now. They're going well for you. If you're here and you're down, I hope maybe we can help lift you up just a little bit. But it is a struggle. And like this actress said, it's one of these roles that we just kind of have to learn a lot about as we get into it, right? And we do that how? We listen to experts, we read books, right? That's just the two things we do, especially in our culture. I thought it would be fun for you, though, to listen to some experts from the past 100 years. Because if you're ever feeling as a parent, like, man, I'm just not getting this right. Like, this is a struggle. This is something that it just grinds on me, right? I want you to hear some of our experts from the last 100 years, because to be honest, I don't know that they're getting it right any better than some of us have in the past. Here's some really funny things that I found this past week looking at some experts. In 1910, moms, I'm sorry, but a lot of these had to do with moms, okay? 1910, moms. If you wanted to have a beautiful baby, you were to refrain from having ugly thoughts. Seriously, this is in print. Like if you had an ugly child, and I've never met a mother who had a baby that said, oh, look how ugly this baby is. Every baby is beautiful to its mother. But apparently, if your baby came out ugly, it was because you were having ugly thoughts while you were carrying that child. Now, that was 1910. I want to back up 1894, because I found this one really, really funny. I guess it's funny. Dr. Emmett Holt in 1894, now think about this, said that there should be absolutely no playing with babies until they hit at least 6 months of age. No playing with a baby. Anybody do that? He claimed that if you played with a baby before it was 6 months of age, that you would create an agitated and nervous child. I would claim if you don't play with that child before they're 6 months of age, the mom and dad are going to be agitated and nervous. I mean, it's just, I don't get that one at all. 1916, this is a great one. Moms, again, sorry ladies, moms were sternly warned, if you nursed your child while you were angry, you were going to develop a colicky baby. 1910, 1916. If you nursed a child while you're angry, that baby's going to be colicky. Anybody have a colicky baby? Don't raise your hands. You're not supposed to admit to that. You're apparently angry at something. Up through the 20s, we believed in this country that if you were a left-handed baby, we should actually learn that out of a child. We didn't want left-handed kids. We didn't believe they were as intelligent. In the 1920s, we believed, yeah, for all of you left-handers, sorry. In the 1920s, we thoroughly believed that you should leave a child outside all day long as much as possible. Like this was how you created healthy kids. Now, I actually found proof that people bought into this and did it. Should put that picture on the screen real quick. This is how they solved this in the cities, no lie. This is what, so for every mother that your heart just raced into your throat, this is actually what we did with kids in the cities, because doctors said you need to keep them outside. Okay, that's how we create healthy babies. You gotta put them outside. So you build a little cage, 6 stories off the ground in the city and put that kid out there and just hope that cage doesn't come loose, right? Anybody have a kid that was always playing with stuff? He'd probably take that little bolt out. Little Johnny takes the bolt out, and there he goes, right? 1932, a government pamphlet was produced. Now, you're going to love this one. Decidedly declaring that when you have your child, it was best for the child to immediately begin potty training. Right after the baby is born. Now, I don't know if that sank into you just then, but I kept all week thinking, how do you do that? Like, if you have an infant, what do you do? Just walk around with the infant, no clothes on, just holding it out like this? I mean, I don't even know what to do with a baby. Immediately begin potty training. That was what was healthiest for the child. I also had this thought, this will tell you where my mind goes. I figured that was a Russian tactic. Like, that was a Cold War strategy, right? Because we didn't have computers yet, so they couldn't hack anything. So they thought this, hey, let's just tell the Americans to potty train their newborns. That'll really mess everything up. Last one, 1962, closer to when I was born. Dr. Walter Sackett, I like this guy, declared that you needed to give your child black coffee at the age of 6 months. That was the appropriate age to give your child black coffee. Now listen, to be fair to him, I think he waited a long time because he actually declared that they could have bacon and eggs by 6 weeks, okay? So I think that was just the coffee is a little late to the game. Parenting is an exhausting thing. It's ups and downs. And if the experts are telling us one thing, the books are telling us something else. Can I show you a few pictures of books that are common right now on our shelves? Like, these are at Amazon or at the local bookstore if they still make those. And you can find these books right now, and they tell you as parents what we're gravitating towards. Look at this. This first one, The Happiest Baby on the Block. Who's not going to buy this book? Because you want your kid to be the happiest child on the block, right? Give me the next one. Your self-confident baby. Well, of course I'm going to buy this. I want my kid to be self-confident. I want them to do well in life. Give me the third one. The Whole Brain Child, as opposed to only training half of my child, right? I mean, there's just this implication that these people have figured out something that's, you have to get it. You have to buy it. Now, this last one I'm at odds with, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. Growing Kids God's Way, because we all know there's only one way to grow a kid. You can laugh at that. I'm being if you have this book on your shelf, it's okay. I take issue with the title a little bit because it just seems like you're scaring kids or scaring parents into thinking, I got to get this book. There's only one way, and they figured it out, right? Parenting's rough. Parenting's hard. Parenting's exhausting, and we're all just trying to figure out how to invest, right? And even if your kids are like mine, they're kind of up and in college age and moving on up, and they're becoming adults, right? You're still, as a parent, never going to let go of that thing that you want to invest in your kids, even though it's exhausting. I want to start with some timeless principles this morning, and we're going to roll through these pretty quickly. And here's the thing. I hope you don't jump the gun on me. You're going to see some verses in your worship flyer, but here's the thing. I think some of these verses get really badly twisted, and they bring added pressure to parents. So stay with me for just a second, because I want to kind of look at them in a way that I hope adds a little light to the subject and maybe even teaches you some what I hope are timeless truths, okay? You can go read lists, you can go get books, you can talk to the experts, you can listen to podcasts, but I want to talk about what I think are some 4 very core timeless truths. Not how you work them out all the time, but that they're truths that you have to grab a hold of as a parent if you really want to raise your child in a way that honors God. So let's dig in. The first one is going to be in Matthew 19. It's obviously starting with Jesus, who has this interaction with a group of adults who eventually brings some kids on the scene. So he's having a very grown-up meeting. He's having maybe an adult Bible study out under a tree. I don't know, but this meeting is going on, and it says in verse 13, then children were brought to him, that he might lay hands on them and pray. And the disciples rebuked the people. Basically, they rebuked the parents. But Jesus said, let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of heaven. And he laid his hands on them anyway. Jesus is out, he's teaching. By now he's become popular. He's recognized as a teacher who has authority. He's somebody that you want to be around, right? So people are flocking to him. As they do, some parents bring their kids. I mean, it's just what you do, right? You want your best for your kids. So you're going to take your kids to the place where you think they can benefit. And here's a man of God, a man who apparently has authority when he teaches. It's so strong and so on him that people recognize, and he can do miracles. And so he has proof that he is more than just a regular local pastor or follower in some ways. He has this kind of authority about him. And what do you want? I want my kids to experience that. I want him to pray over them. I want him to kind of guarantee my kids are going to be okay, that they're going to do well. I want my kids to succeed, right? But the disciples are looking at this and they're going, wait a minute, but he's important. He's a big guy. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but he's the Son of God. He's a big man around here. He carries authority, and we don't need kids on the scene. Like, they're just kind of bringing us down. He's working with the grown-ups. You kids go away for just a second. But Jesus intervenes. And look at what he says. He says, to such as these, to these little ones, to these kids, belongs the kingdom of heaven. Now, don't misinterpret that. I know some of you parents, if you have like 2s and 3s and 4-year-olds, you're not going to misinterpret that. You're thinking, my kid doesn't belong in heaven just yet. Like, there's something wrong with my kid and the way they behave this week, but they may never get there. We've all been there. But he's not saying, listen, he's not saying our kids are innocent. He's not saying, oh, your kids are so innocent that they're just going to slide into heaven. That's not what he's doing. If you back up a chapter, I want to highlight a verse that he actually, Matthew recorded before this event. In Matthew 18, verse 3, Jesus says to another crowd, he says, truly I say to you, unless you turn, talking to adults, turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Then watch what he says. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Kids are not humbled because they do it to themselves. Do you know that? Kids are humbled because of their place in life. Kids are humbled because they're vulnerable. Kids are humbled because they're weak. Kids are humbled because they have to trust on everybody else for everything necessary for life. If you think about it, you cannot raise a baby by just bringing him home from the hospital, putting him in a crib, and just saying, I'll be back when you're 2 or 3 or 5 or when you're ready for grade school. They're completely dependent on parents. So Jesus is not saying, hey, these kids, they're going to slide into heaven because they're so innocent. He's saying these kids have something you adults need to pay attention to. They have this humility that just is, it's because of where they are in life. And he says, you must turn and be the same way. You adults, you kids don't humble themselves. They are humbled. You, as grown-ups, humble yourselves because you realize your place in the world, because you realize your place before God. See, it's a completely different way of thinking about it. And he uses these kids as this illustration of trust, this illustration of just complete faith, of total reliance, that they have no other way to be because that's all they can be. And he elevates this idea of total reliance, of dependence, of that simple faith. And here's the timeless principle. He elevates the value of kids. He elevates the value, but not because they're innocent, because they're dependent. Right? He elevates the value because they have to rely on him. They don't have a choice. And he says to us, you got to do the same thing. But in Matthew 19, as he's talking about the kids, what he's doing is he's elevating the value of these little ones in the middle of all of these people who would say, but this is an important meeting. And by the way, he's not elevating their value by just giving them everything they want. He doesn't elevate their value by giving them every experience in life they want. He doesn't elevate their value by giving them every thought or desire or thing they ask for, right? Which is what our culture does a lot of, I think. I remember Sue and I would, when our kids were little, by the time they start to hit about like kindergarten and first grade, we noticed that in their bedrooms, we just like would have all of this stuff we'd have to dust, all this collection of trophies. Because you put your kids in activities and it didn't matter if the team won their division, it just simply was you were going to get a trophy if you just signed up. If you kid showed up for one game out of 6 and he got a trophy, right? And we started to realize that. And look, by the way, if your kid has these trophies, it's okay. All right, we're not shooting parents in the foot this morning. We're not trying to shame you. I'm just saying you realize that our kids are given these experiences. We started to talk and realize that our kids had this image that every time they stepped onto the soccer field or the basketball court or something, there kind of needed to be this red carpet experience that happened, like it was press day or at a movie release or premiere. It's just crazy, but our kids you could see it, that started to think that, I mean, not my kid is not special, but I mean, come on, my kids didn't make it to the Olympics just yet. We're holding out hope for a little bit, but we created this red carpet experience for kids that were 4, 5, and 6 years old. And in our culture, we deem that as really important, right? Look, when Jesus elevated the value of these kids, do you see what he did? He stopped teaching the grown-ups. He stopped talking theology for a second. He stopped conveying the truth of God for a second. And he lived it. He broke his routine. He got face to face with these little ones. He gave them time. Right? When you elevate the value of a child, it's not just about giving them what they want. Now, they're going to tell you that, right? Okay, but they're kids. Parents, relax. If your kids are still little and they're not verbal yet, your day is coming. Right? The day is coming where you don't love me because what? You wouldn't buy them something, or you wouldn't let them drive at 13, or that day's coming too. I mean, it's one of those things. They have this way they know how to pull on a parent's heartstrings, and you kind of go, maybe I'm a bad parent because I made them eat like that green leafy stuff or something. If you loved me, you wouldn't make me stay home on Friday nights or whatever. Fill in the blank. Parents, it's coming. You know it is. Jesus didn't elevate the value of these kids by giving them everything they wanted. He gave them what they needed. And what they needed was some face time. He broke his routine. He stopped working. He got on their level. He knelt down. He prayed. He touched. He invited them into his space. He gave them value, but not because he gave them everything they wanted. He pressed pause. We used to do things with our kids like you get on the floor with puzzles, or Legos was always a fun thing, or with my daughter it was Polly Pockets, if you don't remember those. But you got on the floor as a parent or at the end of the day, and you were always trying to spend time with your kids. Why? Because you want to pause and show them how valuable they are. You elevate their value by pressing pause in your life, not by giving them the greatest experience. So if you're sitting here this morning thinking, man, I can't afford this, or I can't afford, to even let my kid go to school and drive the newest car, which if you've not been on the campus of Allen High School, their car is way nicer than mine. And so it's pretty daunting for our kids to go to school in this culture. But the reality is that's not what they necessarily need, right? Last summer, when we ran VBS and I was in that front classroom outside, I would teach the lessons, and I didn't have to. Maybe I shouldn't have. But there's something in me that still wants to, as much as I can, to take the time to get on the level with our kids, to make sure our kids see a pastor, their parents' pastor, get down on their level. So I get on the floor with the kids and teach the lesson. It's a core belief of mine, that you get down on their level, that you give them that face-to-face time, that you convey that value. In fact, if you don't know this because your kids aren't to this level yet, one of the things we're beginning to work on at Journey is to shape a youth ministry, because we've got kids that are getting to be that age. And one of my core convictions is that our kids begin to come worship with us. So by 6th grade, we are, and we've talked with parents already who have kids this age, we're inviting our young people to come here. Because this isn't big church and we send them to little church. This is just church. And especially as our kids grow, we want them to know they belong to the church, and we want them to have that face-to-face time and to be able to worship with peers as they age. So that when they get to college and they leave this area, they don't go away and can't find another youth group experience, so they just don't go to church. They drop God altogether. It's a conviction that we elevate the value of our kids, and part of that is just by getting face-to-face with them. worry about the money you don't have. Worry about the time you do have. Give them that experience. Second principle. I know you've heard this verse, whether or not you have been a believer or even read the Bible very much. Proverbs 22 says this, verse 6, train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Now, this is one abused verse. This is one abused verse. In fact, it's abused because it's a way that sometimes churches or pastors or I don't know who heap kind of some shame on parents. Like, oh, you're having a problem with your kid? Probably messed up, didn't teach him well. Guess you really screwed up, didn't you? That's not what this verse is saying. This has just been way too abused. And unfortunately, parents, we've let it bother us. You got to remember that Proverbs is a book of generalized truths. And those general truths will be general whether or not they come to pass. In other words, it's a general truth that if you teach a child the things that are important when they're little, when they're small, they're going to remember it as they get older, right? It doesn't mean that they're never going to get in trouble. It doesn't mean that they're never going to break the law or hurt your feelings. But in general, it means that if you train them starting early, if you teach them starting early, that it's beneficial to them for their whole lives. And so here's the principle: communicate truth. As a parent, it's my job to communicate truth. As a parent, it's my job to communicate truth. Again, this is not about shaming you as a parent, but this is about saying parenting is hard. Because when you communicate truth, you're having to take that time. You're having to formulate even what you believe. And believe it or not, as your kids grow into the future, they're going to start having cultural events and things encounter their world that are different from what you had growing up. And they're going to start asking questions you never asked. And it's going to keep happening. Their kids are going to do the same thing. And so it's always going to be a chore. But it's our job to communicate truth that will guide them for their whole lives. We miss this, though. We often think that communicating is telling. And it's more than that. One of the fears that we had as parents was the fact that our kids would get that PK label. If you don't know what PK is, that's good. It means you weren't around some interesting things growing up. But PK is short in church world for preacher's kid. And my kids will tell you even till today, that label gets kind of put on them. Oh, you're a pastor, you're a preacher's kid. And with that comes a lot of expectations and maybe some things that aren't good or healthy, but they're there. You just have to admit it. We didn't want that for our kids. There's all these really great illustrations of what we don't want for our kids. If you didn't know, Marilyn Manson is a preacher's kid. Alice Cooper is a preacher's kid. Katy Perry is a preacher's kid. Jessica Simpson's a preacher. I'm not saying anything negative about these people. I'm just saying that they have lived their lives in very public platforms, and you know what's happened to them. You've seen it play out, right? You've seen it play out. They struggle in ways, and people assume and force upon them some things. And so that title, we struggled with that. And part of it was we went back to this verse, and we kept forcing ourselves to have the conversation about how do we not just communicate truth with our words, but our actions. Not just words. Parents, you can't say Jesus is important on Sunday and walk away from him all week long. And the brutal reality is the times where maybe Sue and I would have an argument or we'd get into a disagreement, we had to do it in such a way where our actions and our words conveyed the truth of the gospel in front of our kids. We couldn't just tell them, oh, God's important, and then act a different way. And believe it or not, you think, oh, but it's a preacher's home, right? It's got to be easier. No, it's not. Ask my family. Actually, don't ask them, because they've got stories. It's not easier. It's not, that just do as I say type of mentality doesn't work. I say it another way. You've heard me say it. Rules without relationship will equal rebellion. You have to have not just words, but actions together. If God really is important in your life, you cannot just tell your kids he's important. You have to model it. And the longer you wait to model it, the more you're going to have to work harder to model it in the future. If you wait until your kid is 16, it's going to take years to undo what happened from birth to 16. Again, this is not about shame. This is just reality. It's on us to be able to communicate truth. But to do that, it's got to be more than just our words. It's got to be our actions. And when we look at this verse, this train up a child in the way he should go, it has to be more than just telling them what to do. There has to be consistency in the things that we say and we do. Third principle. Proverbs 13, we're going to shift over just a little bit. Another one that is incredibly weirdly used in the church sometimes. Verse 24, whoever spares the rod hates his son. Man, I could just hear it. This is like an old school preacher verse for me. I hear somebody in my head saying this, and I feel like I feel like I can almost hear some people thinking, that's right, man, just grab the belt, grab the switch, grab the tree branch, because all they need is if you just bust their tails a couple good times, we'll straighten them out, right? No. Read the whole verse with me. Whoever spares the rod hates his son, but whoever loves him is diligent to discipline them. I have heard this verse used to define and defend corporal punishment for years. Now, how you choose to discipline parents, can I say something? That there are options. You have to decide, right? Abuse is never okay. Now that I've said that, this verse is not about, I believe, corporal punishment. When you said spare the rod in their culture, that word rod, they would have thought of a shepherd's staff, because that's what it is, a staff. They would have thought of a very long stick with probably a hook at the end. You see it around the holidays when everybody puts their little manger scenes out, and usually Joseph has a shepherd's staff. And it's this long, long rod with a hook at the end. And shepherds would use that to walk behind their sheep and guide them. They could take that long stick and they could bump a sheep over here and kind of cut him back the other way. And as that sheep would cut, everybody would cut, because sheep, they just kind of go where the crowd goes. Or he could bump them on this side. He might whack them, I don't know, but it certainly was not an abusive thing. It was a directional thing. It was about moving them forward. It was about walking with them. It was not about beating them. Corporal punishment is not the guarantee of anything being great in your kid's life. It just isn't. Watch this, because here's the principle. Your ability to regulate discipline is. Regulate discipline. In other words, that your ability to walk with your children, to help them see, understand, bump, nudge, guide, direct. Does that mean that it's sometimes there might be reason for some kind of corporal punishment? You have to decide that depending on the nature of that child. I was working with a parent recently who said, I've got a kid that if you spank them, they just laugh at you. Everybody have a kid like that? Those are the best. Like, you just know those are special kids, right? I mean, but spanking, as far as this parent was concerned, it's a non-issue. It doesn't do anything. We talked about how that child was wired and bent and why that didn't work and why to continue to do that, because all you're going to do as a parent is escalate things. That's not right. It's not effective. The timeless principle is we've got to regulate discipline with our kids. Look, it's this kind of conversation. I heard Lee Cockrell, who used to work for Disney and writes a lot of time management principles and things like that. I heard him say this one time, that you can do the easy things now, and life's probably going to get a lot harder. Or you can tackle the hard things now, and life's probably going to get easier. It's exhausting to raise a kid. It's a lot of investing to raise a kid, right? But if you put it off, if you don't learn how to regulate discipline, if you don't learn how to take those moments in life and bump them from one side to the other, to kind of say, hey, no, that's not the best way to go. Let's talk about this. To build into your kids' lives, to take the time. Regulate discipline. If you don't do that, they're not going to learn. But it's not about corporal punishment. Please don't use that verse for that. It just doesn't make sense. Really, I'm sure the writer is screaming, just please stop doing do as I say, not as I do. Stop having that mentality. You got to think about your child. You got to figure out how to invest in their lives. Regulate that discipline. Train them, teach them which ways are better. I think I put this verse in there. I did not, actually. Okay, so Hebrews 12:7. Write this verse down. Hebrews 12:7. It's not in your notes. I want you to go back and look at this verse. Paul talks about discipline, and he makes a statement. I wanted to go ahead and read it because I think it applies. I think it brings a lot more understanding to the area of discipline with our kids when we think about it. In verse 7 of Hebrews 12, he says, it's for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? The whole point here is that discipline is an essential element of relationship. It's an essential element of our relationship with God. It's an essential element in our family relationships. A good parent disciplines. A bad parent puts it off, lets it go, overlooks things, doesn't realize that by not regulating discipline in that moment, it might be easy right now, but it's going to get harder down the road, right? God always disciplines to restore us, to renew us, to heal us, and we should do the same thing for our kids, right? Regulate discipline. Okay, one more quickly, and I almost cut this out because I was worried about time, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. 2 verses, and it emphasizes the fathers, okay? And I think, unfortunately, men, sometimes we're the ones who may be more guilty of this, but let's look at them real quick. Colossians 3:21. Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. Don't provoke your children. You know what provoke is. Don't poke at them. Don't aggravate them. Don't exacerbate them. Ephesians 6, verse 4. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. Don't exacerbate them till they get angry, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Parents, can I tell you, there's one thing here. This is really about illustrating restraint. The whole principle here is just illustrating restraint. And let me tell you why I think it's important. When Paul describes provoking our kids, what he's saying is, there are times when you just react. There's times when, as a parent, you react to something your kid just did. Now, there are appropriate reactions and there are inappropriate reactions, but can we all agree that the better way to parent is to hopefully that you leave your actions and lead with those actions and not reactions? That we want to model something for our kids. We want to have a plan about the way we're raising our kids. We want to have a path that we've thought about, that we've kind of charted out, that we thought this would be best for this child. And then we want to try to act in a way to nudge them along, to lead them along, to walk with them, especially as they get older, right? But this whole idea of reacting will just cause another reaction. You see this all the time, right? You see it if you catch me on a bad day on 75, right? Which, by the way, don't go on 75 right now at all because of the rain. But you see this in your drive, your commute to work, right? Somebody acts, you react, they react back, and where does it stop? It's an escalation of emotions. He says, fathers, I think he says that intentionally because dads, sometimes I think we're the worst at this. I don't know why, because we're emotional pygmies, or at least our wives may say that. I don't know, but we're stunted somewhere, men. I don't know, but we don't have to be this way. He says, fathers, don't exacerbate your kids. Don't provoke them. Think about it. Stop responding, stop reacting, and now act with intention. Be very intentional in the way you act around your kids. Parenting's confusing, it's exhausting, and I know sometimes probably some of you came in here this morning thinking, oh great, he's gonna give me like the 10 things that I have to do this week, like like which chores are appropriate, or what's the best school to send your kids to, what's the best way to educate your kids. Listen, it's not that easy. It's not that. If you thought that it was that easy, somebody really misled you, okay? Or you read the wrong government pamphlet from the early 1900s. That's not what parenting is about, right? These principles are just the start of it, but you got to dig into the principles behind the thing. We have to begin to elevate the value of our kids, not with just doing things for them. We got to get face to face. We got to stop trying to give them all these great experiences. Experiences are going to come. You know what? When you get face to face with your kid, that's the experience they're going to remember anyway. Because that's what they want. Communicating truth. Not just with words, but with our actions. Be the model of who you want your kid to become. Don't just use the do as I say routine. It doesn't work. Regulate discipline. Don't settle for the easy now. Parents, I know those nights when you're just exhausted and the one more book at bedtime or the one more story will just wear you out. But go to bed extra tired that night, right? Take the time. Take the time. Don't, if you have to, part of the way you discipline is through guiding and nurturing. Think of yourself like a shepherd. What can I do? One more story tonight. One more time together. One more moment. And then go to bed tired, knowing that you're doing all you can do. Illustrate restraint. Come up with a plan. Don't just react. Make sure you know how you want to act. Look, kids are resilient. I know we say that all the time, but they are. Look around. We all made it. Right? You grew up. You did fine. You're here. I know. The counselor you pay a lot of money to, but still you made it this far, right? Kids are resilient. Don't fear. Listen to me. Don't fear the fads in parenting. Don't let them push you around. Don't think you have to always buy the newest book. Find those timeless principles and ground your parenting in that. And then here's the last thing I want to say, right? This is going to be the hard work. So this is what you're going to do from here on out. Look, if you don't have a kid right now, but you still have somebody that's 20 years and underneath you, here's what I want you to do. Invest now and enjoy it later. Invest now, enjoy it later. That's what parenting is. That's why it makes you so tired. That's why on those sleepless nights when that baby won't stop crying and you just want to see if you can put them in the other room and put pillows around the door and shut it, and if they you could go to sleep some in the other room, and that's why you don't do it, right? First of all, that's wrong, but it's not good parenting right there, but things just come out of my mouth. So, but that's the thing, is you want to what? You want to invest now. Take the time. Do the hard work so that you can enjoy it later. Because as they grow and the conversations change and the relationships change, it's so worth it. Maybe you're not going to have a kid, but maybe as these people around you grow and you're building into other young people in those relationships, trust me, you're going to parent a kid whether you have one or not at some point in time. Invest now and enjoy it later. Let me pray for us.